here's a question that's keeping a lot of people up at night. If AI can do everything, write code, diagnose diseases, manage portfolios, or even create art, what's left for us? And here's the scarier version. If AI can do everything, what's left for the next generation? Because right now, there's a whole cohort of young people, especially young men, looking at the future and asking, do I even matter? They're watching AI take over jobs. They're hearing about universal basic income as the solution. They're being told, don't worry, you don't need to work, you don't need to build, we'll just give you a check. That's not a solution, that's a death knell. But here's what I want you to understand. AI can't replace what you and I know. It can't replace our humanity, our experience, our judgment, the map we built by walking the path. And the younger generation, they need that map. They're hungry for it. Stay with me. All right, so let me take you back a few years. I was in my mid-50s and I was starting to feel it. Maybe not physically. Well, yeah, a little physically, most definitely physically, but mostly mentally. I felt like I'd lost my edge. Younger guys at work, they were faster, sharper, more up to date on the latest tools and trends and the latest cultural items as well. And I started to wonder, am I past my prime? Is this it? What do I have left to contribute? I mean, I could still do the job, but I wasn't the guy coming up with the brilliant new idea in the meeting anymore. I was the guy who'd say, yeah, we tried that in 2003 or 2013 or whatever. Didn't work, and here's why. Which, by the way, is actually useful, but it doesn't feel as sexy as being the idea guy. So I was wrestling with this. And then I came across a book by Arthur Brooks called From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And it changed everything. So Brooks is a social scientist. He's also a Harvard professor, I believe. Don't hold that against him. Former president of the American Enterprise Institute, and he writes about this shift that happens to all of us, usually in our 50s and 60s. He calls it the transition from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. And here's what that means. So fluid intelligence is the kind of intelligence that peaks in our 20s and 30s, maybe in our early 40s. It's raw processing power, speed, creativity, the ability to operate and execute, the ability to solve novel problems quickly. It's the kind of intelligence that makes you a great coder, a great surgeon, a great athlete. But here's the thing. Fluid intelligence declines with age, just does. And when you start to feel that decline, it can be terrifying because you think, I'm losing it. I'm not as good as I used to be. But Brooks says that's not the whole story, and it's certainly not the end of the story. Because while fluid intelligence is declining, crystallized intelligence is rising. Crystallized intelligence is the wisdom that comes from experience. It's pattern recognition. It's judgment. It's the ability to see the big picture and connect the dots. It's about knowing what works and what doesn't, not because you read it in a book, but because you've lived it, and you've lived it, and you've lived it over decades in many cases. And here's the kicker. Crystallized intelligence doesn't peak in your 50s, 60s, or even 70s. So when I read that, it really hit me. I'm not declining. I'm just transitioning. I'm moving from being the guy who does the work, who executes, who operates, to being the guy who might teach others how to do the work and teach others the patterns that I've learned over the past 2 or 3 decades of professional work. And it's not less valuable. It might even be more valuable. Brooks tells the story of Johann Sebastian Bach. So Bach, as we know, was a musical genius, but in his 50s, he wasn't composing the flashy, innovative stuff anymore like he was when he was younger. He was teaching, mentoring, passing on the craft. And his students, they went on to change the world. So Brooks also talks about a study of scientists. The researchers found that most innovative scientists, the ones who win Nobel Prizes, and they really tend to peak in their 30s and 40s. But most influential scientists, the ones who mentor the next generation and shape entire fields, they peak in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. So here's what I realized. The feeling that I'd lost my edge, that was real, but it certainly wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where my contribution isn't about being the smartest guy in the room, it's about helping the younger guys in the room get smarter. And that's what crystallized intelligence is all about. Now, don't get me wrong, I still have moments where I forget where I put my keys, or I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. How many of us have done that? It's not crystallized intelligence, that's just getting on in years just a little bit. But when it comes to solving these complex problems, navigating uncertainty, seeing patterns that younger people miss, that's where I'm best now. And that's where you're at your best too. So that's the first thing that I'd like you to understand. You're not declining, you're just transitioning. And the world needs what you're transitioning into. Because here's what's happening out there. All right, so let's talk about the younger generation, because they're facing something we didn't have to face at their age, certainly. The existential uncertainty about whether they even have a place in the economy. And I'm not exaggerating about that. They're watching AI take over jobs, not just manual labor jobs, and certainly not just manual labor jobs. It's really the white collar jobs that are suffering the brunt of this AI takeover. It's knowledge work. AI can write code, analyze data, they can draft legal documents, diagnose diseases. And the messaging these younger folks are getting is like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll just give everybody universal basic income. You don't need to work, you don't need to contribute. We'll just write you a check and you go away and just be happy. So great. So that plan is to turn an entire generation into trust fund kids who never had to work for anything. What could possibly go wrong with that? So look, I'm not here to get political, but I am here to say this. Universal basic income might solve the economic problem, but it doesn't solve the human problem. Because we're not just economic units. We're not just economic robots out there. We're human beings. And human beings, especially men, are hardwired to build, to protect, to provide, to have a mission. So when you take that away, you don't just take away a paycheck. You take away identity, purpose, meaning. So I see this in younger guys I talk to, and I bet you see it too. And it's not everybody, but certainly there's a large enough cohort out there that feel like they're anxious, they're uncertain, they're asking, what's my purpose? What's my mission? And do I even matter anymore? And a lot of them are getting an answer they don't want to hear. You don't need to matter. Just play video games, live with your parents, collect your check. And that's not just sad. It's really, really dangerous. Because men without purpose, without mission, without identity, that doesn't end well for them or for society. Just look back in history. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that every young person is struggling with this, and I'm not saying it's only young men. But I am saying there's a pattern here, a quiet crisis. You see it in the statistics, rising rates of anxiety, depression, isolation, young men dropping out of the workforce, dropping out of college, and really not even pursuing relationships with the opposite sex in many cases. And you see it in conversations, the forums, the comments section, all over social media, all over the internet. What's the point? Why even try? I'll never be able to afford a house anyways. Well, AI is going to take my job before I even get started. And here's what absolutely breaks my heart. They're not wrong to be concerned. Look, the world is changing fast, and the old playbook doesn't work the way it used to. So here's what they're missing. I don't think they need a new playbook. They need a guide. They need someone who's walked the path, who's faced uncertainty, maybe over 2 or 3 decades, who's made mistakes and more mistakes and more mistakes, but learned from all of them. They need someone who can say, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's uncertain. Yeah, you might just ask yourself, what on earth am I doing right now? But here's how you navigate it. Here's what matters. Here's what lasts. And here's what you can take out of this. to make that bad experience a great experience. So they don't need universal basic income. They need what you and I have. They need the map. They need the wisdom, the judgment, the experience. They need to know there's still a place for them, that they still matter, that they can still build something meaningful. And you and I, we can give them that, not by solving their problems for them, but by showing them how you solved the same problems 20 years ago. And not by handing them a check, but by handing them a framework. And here's why that matters, because AI can't do what you do. All right, so let's talk about AI. There's a lot of hype, a lot of fear, a lot of AI is going to replace us all. And look, AI is powerful and it's getting better every day. It can do things right now that seemed impossible 5 years ago, even a year ago. And there's definitely a role for governments to put in some safety measures on top and around AI from a policy perspective. I'm not arguing that. But here's what AI can't do: it can't replace yours and my humanity. And let me explain kind of what I mean about that. AI is trained on data, massive amounts of data. It can find patterns in that data. It can make predictions. It can generate outputs that look human in many cases. But here's what it can't do: it can't live. It can't make a decision and then live with the consequences of that decision for 20 years. It can't fail, pick itself up, and try again from an emotional standpoint, I'm talking about, and a mental standpoint. It can't feel the weight and responsibility when someone's counting on you. It can't experience the joy of building something that lasts. So let me give you an example. Say you're mentoring a young guy who's trying to decide whether to take a safe job or start his own business. AI can give him the data. It can tell him the success rate of startups in that particular industry, the average salary or take home or profit margin in his field, the pros and cons of entrepreneurship. But AI cannot tell him what it felt like when you made that same decision 30 years ago. It can't tell him about the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the times you almost quit and what that felt like in those moments. It can't tell him about the mistakes you made and how you fixed them. It can't tell you about the lessons you learned throughout the entire process. It can't tell him about the relationships that you built and that I built and the lessons we've learned, the person that we became through the process. That's the stuff AI can't touch, because that's not data, that's humanity. Or here's another one. Say you're advising someone on how to handle a particularly difficult conversation with a colleague. The AI can give them scripts and communication frameworks and best practices. And yeah, they may be valuable, certainly. I'm not saying they're not. But AI can't tell them what you learned from the time you handled that conversation badly and what you do differently now. It can't give them the nuance, the read the room judgment, the sense of timing that only comes from experience. That's crystallized intelligence. And here's the thing: younger generation, they know this. They might not articulate it in this way, but they feel it. They're drowning in information. They can Google anything. They can ask ChatGPT anything, but they're starving for wisdom. The wisdom of crystallized intelligence, of decades of experience living here on this planet. They're starving for someone who can say, I've been where you are. Here's what I learned. Here's what really matters. And here's what lasts. And here's what you can expect to take away and learn from it. So I'll give you a real example from my own life. A few years ago, a younger guy I was mentoring came to me with a problem. He'd been offered a promotion, more money, more responsibility, but it would mean relocating his family and working longer hours. He asked me, what should I do? And I didn't give him an answer. I told him a story. I told him a time about when I took a similar promotion, how excited I was, how it felt like the right move for my career. And 2 years later, I'd realized I'd missed 2 years of my kids' lives, 2 years I could not get back. And this is when they were little. It means even more when they're little, of course. I told him, I'm not saying, don't take the job. I'm saying just make sure you know what you're trading, because you can't untrade it and you can't get that time back. understand where your priorities really are. And he thanked me, not because I gave him the answer, but because I gave him a map. That's what AI can't do. AI can optimize, it can predict, it can generate, but it can't care. It can't look you in the eye and say, I've been there, I know what it costs, here's what I wish I'd known. That's the humanity AI can't touch. And that is what the world needs from you and me right now. All right, so here's where we land. You have something the world desperately needs. You have crystallized intelligence, wisdom, experience, judgment. You have the map. And the younger generation, not all of them, but many of them are kind of lost, anxious, directionless, uncertain. They need the map. So here's the question. What are we going to do about it? Because here's what I believe. We have a commission. You may not look at it this way. I'm just sharing a few thoughts that I have. So not a commission in the religious sense, though if that resonates with you, great, but really in the human sense. We are compelled to extract and document and share what we know. Not because it makes us money, although it might, and not because it makes us famous, although it might, but it's because it's the right thing to do, because we've been given something. And when you've been given something, you're supposed to pass it on. I truly believe that. Now, I'm not saying you need to write a book or start a podcast or become a guru. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Totally up to you. But maybe your commission is to mentor one young person, maybe at your church or at another organization that you're a part of or that you're connected to through your profession or your workplace in some way. Maybe it's to write down the lessons you've learned and give them to your kids. Maybe it's to show up at your company and say, hey, I'm not the fastest guy on the clock here anymore, but I can teach the young guys how to think about problems in a way that they probably never had been trained to do. The point is, you have something to give, and someone needs it. Because here's what's at stake. If we don't do this, if we don't extract our crystallized intelligence, the younger generation is going to be left with two options. Option one, AI. Cold, data-driven, inhuman, and I don't think a lot of our leadership is really thinking about this option. And option two, nothing, just drift, just universal basic income and video games. And I certainly don't think our leadership is thinking through the ramifications of what that will do to an entire or most of an entire generation, especially of young men. And neither of these options gives them what they actually need. Some hope, a little bit of clarity, maybe a little bit more direction, and most of all, perhaps, a sense that they matter. That's what we can give them, not by solving their problems for them, but by showing them how we solved ours, not by handing them a blueprint, but by handing them maybe what we'd call a framework. And here's why this matters beyond just the individual level. This is how I believe we hold society together. I know that sounds overblown and maybe a little grandiose, but hear me out. Every healthy society has a mechanism for passing wisdom on from one generation to the next, like apprenticeships and mentorships, elders sitting around the fire telling stories, passing that wisdom on. And for a lot of reasons, some good, some bad, we've lost that, I believe. We've become very age segregated. The old hang out with the old, the young hang out with the young. We've become hyper individualistic, and the family and extended family units really have gone by the wayside in many cases. You know, we tell people, well, just go figure it out. Google it. You'll figure it out. And the result is a generation that's anxious, isolated, and uncertain. But we can fix that, or we certainly can try. Not at the policy level, as I mentioned before, and not at an institutional or governmental level, but at a human level. One conversation at a time, one story at a time, one piece of wisdom at a time. So here's what I want you to hear. You don't have to be perfect to do this, and we certainly don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to share what you've learned. The good, the bad, the ugly, the mistakes, the lessons learned, the victories, all of it. Because the younger generation doesn't need perfection. They need honesty. They don't need a hero. They just need a guide. And you and I, we can be that. So here's the challenge. Think about one thing you've learned the hard way, one lesson that cost you something, one piece of wisdom that only came from walking through the fire, at one end to the other, and then find one person to share it with. Maybe it's your son or daughter. Maybe it's a younger colleague. Maybe it's a stranger on the internet. Just share it because that's the work that matters now, I believe. Not just for your family, not just for your community, for the future. This is how we give the next generation hope. This is how we show them they still matter and how we encourage them in their humanity. And this is how we hedge against this slow fade, against purposelessness, against the idea that we're all just economic units waiting for a check. This is the work. All right, so let me tie this all up and bring it home. AI is powerful. It's going to change the world. It already is, but it can't replace our humanity. It can't replace the wisdom that comes from living, from failing, from getting back up, from dusting ourselves off, from figuring it out, from walking the path. And the younger generation, they need that wisdom and they're hungry for it. So don't sit on it. Don't assume it's not valuable. Don't think, who am I to teach anyone anything? What do I know? You're the guy who's been there, who's done that, who's learned the hard way. That's who you are. And that's exactly who the world needs right now. So extract it, document it, share it, one conversation at a time, one story at a time, one piece of wisdom at a time. I'm going to interrupt this just for a second for a little commercial advertisement for a product at the Graybeard project we've got coming up. And it's not ready yet, but it will be very soon. It's going to be at graybeardassessment.com. We've got an entire system. It's an AI-guided system to extract that wisdom, that knowledge, that experience, that crystallized intelligence, get it out of your head, organized and down on paper so that you can actually use it and share it. Maybe you want to start a business or a new enterprise with it of some sort, or maybe you just want to pass it on to your kids and other people that are important in your life as a legacy. It's going to be an awesome process. We have some beta folks that have been through it already, and we're amazed at the results we're able to get for them. So that's going to be at graybeardassessment.com. Graybeardassessment.com. Not ready yet? It will be soon. I'll let you know. Anyways, getting back to our podcast here, that's the commission. And that's really all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. So the next time on Graybeard Radio, we're going to be talking about how to actually do this, how to extract your crystallized intelligence, how to package it, how to share it in a way that actually lands. Because it's one thing to know that you should do it. It's another thing entirely to know how to do it. Until then, keep building, keep sharing, keep showing up. The world needs you now. Talk soon. This is Matt Hempel signing off. Arrivederci.